Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my power ranking series. For my number 31 team, we're going to be looking at the Jacksonville Jaguars, which might be a bit of a surprise to people because they do have some nice things here, but I'll explain it as we go along. All right, so, well, at least the Jacksonville Jaguars have the quarterback here to rebuild around. Lawrence is kind of one of those generational type quarterback prospects, one of the highest rated ever in recent years, and he's really was followed closely by scouts, even all the way back through high school. So there should be no question as to who the quarterback is for this team. The real question is, can Jacksonville continue to develop him and keep him from getting blasted by these defenses, which is what we really need to start looking at here. All right, so let's start with the O-line. There's some strengths and weaknesses. Getting Scherf early on in free agency, fantastic decision by the front office. Washington decided that they just couldn't afford him, which makes sense. It happens. They had to let a premium offensive guard hit the market after tagging him a couple times. He'll be the leader of this line for the foreseeable future. They have Cam Robinson here. They decided to give him money right before the draft kind of started, kind of hooking them into taking Walker at number 1. So he was a bit of a late bloomer, but he got there at the end. He started showing some development near the end of his rookie deal. Franchise tagged him by the team, see if he could keep up. They franchise tagged him again before extending him, as he did show that he could keep up and give a decent level of play. So it was a good idea to keep him. You could do a lot worse than Robinson to protect your quarterback's blind side. Now, for the line, it is much like the Houston Texans. It starts to get more shaky, kind of past those first two players I mentioned. You got Ben Barch, who's now taking the start here. He showed some talent at tackle as a prospect. He was moved into guard after the draft. Very solid athlete. He's gonna be getting basically the whole season to start now, kind of uncontested. Can's gone. Depth is a bit thinner now at guard. He'll be kind of a more of a we'll wait and see. He's a good enough athlete to play it though. They drafted Luke Fortner from Kentucky to take over Linder's spot after he retired. So he's going to be getting the start as a rookie. It's, again, I've talked about rookies enough that do expect some shaky level of play, but I think he's a very solid talent to start. I think I had him as about the 4th round. Uh, he does have Shatley here, who's going to be wanting to compete for starting time. Shatley's the veteran right behind him. I would still probably start Fortner, but that one's a pretty even open competition to me if I was considering this from the Jags perspective. So it's rough trying to start a rookie, but you might not really have a choice here. You still have Jawan Taylor at the right tackle. Jags are kind of hoping that he can kind of take the leap Robinson did in his last year of his rookie deal. They do have a high upside tackle that they drafted last year in Walker Little, who I really like. He was a 2nd-round selection kind of due to injury, and then he had a COVID season in which he wasn't really playing much. But before that, he was deemed an easy 1st-round talent, and I can easily say that I would agree with that looking at him back then if he was able to declare. So if he is developed here, that's great because in case Taylor has not, do look for Walker Little to slide to right tackle and just take that over. Okay. Well, there's a lot to talk about here. This is where the offseason got a little rough for the Jags and every other team in the league as well. I'll explain that in a minute. Jacksonville spent a lot of money filling out this core, and I mean a lot. Zay Jones was a wide receiver 4 for the Raiders. He had good chemistry with Carr in that role. That chemistry is really going to need to show up again after the Jags paid him like $10 million a year for 3 years uh, to do that in a starting wide receiver spot for Trevor Lawrence. Odds aren't really that good for that. Jones seems to do his best role as that wide receiver 4. It's every time we see him really take significant snaps, it's not really worked out. He's tried it for a couple teams now. It's a risk by Jacksonville, not a risk I would have recommended. They went and grabbed Evan Ingram as well. He's on a 1-year prove it deal. That's at least all right. I think he does deserve a 1-year prove it deal instead of a multi-year deal. Jags are really gambling on athletics with that one. It's a little confusing why they wanted him so badly. He can't really block, which is the exact same as Dan Arnold, who they already traded for and had here. So they got 2 tight ends that don't really block particularly well and do most of their work as this big slot type. except Evan Ingram has kind of poor hands. I hope he's fixed those. It's been years, but he's really struggled with catching the ball, especially through traffic. Uh, and then you have that on top of Laviska Shenault, who does really well in that slot receiver role, who's also now buried behind those guys. And then you have Christian Kirk, who we'll get to that in a minute. Kirk also projects and does his best role in the slot, which is kind of interesting. They have an abundance of talent at just one spot in the offense, the slot wide receiver. So you're basically going to be forced to either bench a whole bunch of them or really kind of have them play out of position, right? Laviska Shenault's kind of getting benched now. Evan Ingram's probably gonna have to take a lot more snaps in line. It's just kind of a weird way of going about that. They still have Marvin Jones here. I think he's on one more year. He's had a decent career playing that wide receiver two spot. He's aged well. If he can kind of continue to stay in that wide receiver two spot, I'd imagine he'd still be a very solid option. Although I do think teams can now kind of commit to guarding him a lot more now that Chark is gone, who kind of took that wide receiver X role. All right, so now we have to get to why I said the offseason got rough for other teams, and it is honestly, it's entirely the Jags' fault. They gave Kirk a 4-year, 72 mil base contract that can go past 80 million with incentives. That is an insane amount of money to give a wide receiver that is relatively still unproven. It does not have a single season over 1,000 yards receiving, and even in the yards he has gained, he's never been the wide receiver one in the offenses he's been in. Now that the Jags did that, the wide receiver market drastically spiked in value. And that's why we see so many of these trades and holdouts occurring at that position over the offseason. Teams don't want to pay that. That's insane. It's a massive jump in price. The Jags single-handedly raised the wide receiver market for at least this year, probably another one, maybe for the future if teams really give in. It's getting rough out there. Kirk's really gonna have to take leaps and bounds in development to make that contract worth it, which history has not shown very well so far. The running back room, much better. Snoop Connor was drafted kind of as a relief back, kind of a contact back, power back kind of role. I like him in that. I think that was totally fine value to do that. Robinson's your lead for that. He's your hard runner, your goal line back. I'm glad Lawrence still believes in him, since Urban didn't really seem to. I don't know why, but he's a very good player. I like him a lot. He'll wear these defenses down. You're getting Etienne back from injury. That should help significantly. He'll be great in the receiving game. He's got very good chemistry with Lawrence from Clemson. He should be a very good change of pace style back to Robinson's more grinded play style. You'll at least be getting that. All right. Front seven here is interesting. Lots of money and lots of draft capital was spent here in this offseason. So let's take a look. So for returning players, we've got Brown. There's Tufel. There's Robinson Harris. Those guys are all on the D line, all kind of these solid rotational snap players. They're not bad. You still have Dwayne Smoot and Quarterman here. I don't have much to say on Quarterman. He's a young linebacker. He's been relatively buried here. Smoot has been pretty good at this rotational kind of D end edge piece. He's a very solid locker room guy from what I've been told. Isn't very afraid to get his hands dirty versus the run either. So those are guys that are pretty good to get in your room. You still have Caleb on Chase on. I hope he is finally utilized appropriately here. It has been frustrating, honestly. I like Chase on a lot as this kind of hybrid gadgety piece. I'd be getting him on special teams. He is an excellent special teamer. I really hope Peterson really gets him going like he was at LSU. Please, he was a first round pick. You got to hit on that. Your biggest guy here, Josh Allen, not the quarterback. Really talented athlete, also from Kentucky. He complements this defense very well. He can be a single-hand game wrecker, as seen versus the Bills last year, but that consistency is needed. I'm sure he can get that star rating from me from this season very easily. He's just on the path for it right now. Now for the new guys. So Miles Jack is out. Aluakun is in. Aluakun is a very solid tackler from Atlanta. He's very light though. I think he was playing at 215 last year. Somewhere between 215 and 220 is where he often was weighed in at. His role, I imagine, would be very similar to Jack's, kind of match up mostly on these smaller tight ends, do most of the kind of the deep coverage roles, cover the sideline and sideline, very outside zone schemes. It's just a weird trade-off to me, especially since Jack is younger, had more years left on his contract still. It's just kind of a weird trade-off, especially since they're paying a little kind of decent amount of money. Now for the rookies, Lloyd was taken early. They traded up to get him in the first round. I think he was, by most at least, the consensus linebacker one in the draft. He should help in the run a lot. He's got very solid coverage instincts as well. He's not the most elite athlete. I think he's very good though. I believe he'll pair well with Poisson at least. Then they did something interesting. They drafted Chad Mumma a little while later in day two. He was good value for where they grabbed him, but again, it's a little confusing. They brought in a third linebacker to a room where they cut one to then be replaced by another one and then trade up, take one early. It, it's just weird. He's good depth. He's a very solid player despite, I think, injuries slowed him down a little for his testing numbers. But getting him on the field is going to be a nightmare here with the scheme that they have unless they do a drastic change, which then is going to put other guys in a weird position. So I wouldn't look at it. It's just weird to do. I like Mumma a lot, but it's weird. It's a weird process. The last guy we got to talk about, obviously, is our number one pick in the draft, Trayvon Walker. In my opinion, he was not the best player in the draft, or even the best player at his position. If you look at some of the highlights that even they were showing on draft tape of, especially the linemen, was just Trayvon Walker honestly getting bullied by those guys. But we're going to be positive here. He does have incredible athletic upside, and I mean incredible. That showed at the combine. Taking him at number one is a severe gamble, and it's a gamble the Jags really need to pay off to justify a lot of their jobs at this point. That was a gamble they took. He tested well at the facility when they brought him in. They need to develop him into kind of this elite edge prospect they're hoping to become because and I mean if Thibodeau and Hutchinson, who project much better as these elite edge players, if either one of those shows elite talent and Trayvon Walker does not, that is grounds for sacking for most kind of most front office roles and coaching roles. That's grounds for that most times. So they've got to be very careful, and they've got to spend the time they need. Walker only had, I think it was about a 10 to 13% win rate at the edge in base looks, which is really not that good. Coming out, Hutchinson had 25 to 27% win rate on the edge. Georgia schemed him up a lot to kind of get production out of that front seven, like a lot of times pushing the quarterback basically right into him. He's got a long way to go. I hope he's still studying very hard. Basically, he's going to have no days off. He's got to live up to that number one pick. Or otherwise, a bunch of people might be losing their jobs. All right, defensive backs. Secondary, much like the Texans, pretty weak again. The big name here is Griffin. He's a solid above average starting corner. He knows his zone schemes. He plays bump and run man coverage very well. They have Campbell here from Georgia as well. He's a learning cornerback. I liked his instincts a lot. I think he did a lot of the little things well when he was a prospect last year. He shows up pretty well in man coverage, which they're going to be running a decent amount here. He's still got a little bit to go before he can really come into his own, but I'm okay letting him get the start. Darius Williams paid pretty well here in the offseason to play nickel, which I expect he'll perform admirably at. He played mostly outside corner for the Rams. He really likes to keep his eyes on the quarterback for better or worse. So he'll be a solid player. I think he's already 28 or 29 as well, so he's kind of nearing the tail end of what is most careers. But I think his extension isn't too bad. It's 3 years. The depth here at cornerback though is really not worth noting. They're gonna need take some serious step ups in ability, and it's really all dependent on them developing here. At safety, it's not really any better. You still have Jenkins. That was a long-term deal. Wingard is also here. They're replaceable level starters in this scheme. Barring any insane major development later in their career. The guys behind them showed that they just weren't ready to take that step up. last season. You hope that they can do it this season. Jags are very likely going to have a very rough year as a passing defense, unless that front seven can really get to that quarterback fast enough to kind of cover for it. All right, now we're on to the favorite part, special teams and coaching. There's currently a three-way battle for kicker, and honestly, I have all of them rated so closely that any one of them could win it, and I'm just going to refrain from talking on it too much. It's not going to change my opinion just because I have them rated so closely. We'll leave it as it is, as question marks. Punting's not great, but the guy's young, Logan Cook. He could break out. We do have a notable special teamer as well for this team, which we'll be doing every time there is one, in Jamal Agnew. He was a great pickup last year. He's a very solid guy on both sides of special teams. He can gun, he can not receive, he can, I guess you'll call it receive, on punt returns or kick returns. I think he's a really good special team player. I think he's a good leader of special teams as well. I think keeping him here was a smart idea, and I think that's actually one of the few moves that this previous regime did quite well to get. For coordinators, we don't really have any kind of big names or more unique choices. I can't really say they will elevate or bring down the team specifically, but I will be keeping an eye on what they do from here, especially with this new head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars, where they chose a different accomplished coach this time around in Doug Peterson. Thankfully, Doug's won the Super Bowl as the head coach of the Eagles a few years back. Took a year off of coaching before the Eagles cut him. Kind of a weird, messy situation there. He should kind of give a decent level of, base play, base level of expectations of leading this locker room. And he's gonna likely not abuse his players and staff as the head coach did before him. So while I really don't expect him to make up for a lot of shortcomings on either side of the ball, he's a hell of a lot better than what they had going last year. Uh, Probably the best coach they've had come in recent years. All right, so Jacksonville Jaguars, they're very clearly another rebuild. Good talent, at least they have the quarterback spot kind of filled out. The front seven, if Trayvon Walker hits and the guys start taking leaps, is a good look. But they've got a lot of question marks, especially in that secondary. You need guys to hit, and you're probably going to have to spend a lot more capital drafting that position again. So probably another multi-year rebuild. That's why they're still at the bottom here. We are almost halfway through this section already. We're going to be doing the number 30 team next. I hope to see you all for it. Later.